So what's the one common thing among these guys? They're white men
White
in
men in
suits.
white men in
White
suits.
men in
White men in
suits.
suits.
Well, thank you, my fellow Sids. You are indeed right. They have all hosted or currently host late night talk shows. But one of these is not like the other. Now, don't get me wrong. I like the other ones too.
I forgot I was in New York.
Jimmy. Oh my gosh, how do you do that?
Well, most of them. But Jon Stewart revolutionized the way Americans consume news. And that's why I think that Jon Stewart deserves to be inducted in the TV Hall of Fame. Now let's start at the very beginning. A little history about Jonathan Stewart Leibowitz. Yes, that was his original name. He was born into a family of Jewish immigrants. His mother, Marian, was a teacher and later an educational consultant. His father, Donald Leibowitz, was a physics professor. John's parents divorced when he was 11. He did not share a great relationship with his father. Hence, we now know him as Jon Stewart instead of the Big Leibowitz. Okay, sorry. John grew up in the era of the Vietnam War and the Watergate scandal. This inspired in him, quote-unquote, a healthy skepticism about official reports. Stewart had a reputation of being a funny man in school. He started off his career in the entertainment industry as a stand-up comedian. After overcoming initial stage fright, he made a stand-up debut at New York City's The Bitter End, where his comedic idol Woody Allen also started. This is where he first used the name Jon Stewart as a stage name.
Forgive me, Father, I have sinned. I cursed out my little brother. Hey, Billy, he died for your sins. He didn't twist his ankle. Now get out there and have sex with a goat. Okay.
He landed his first job in television as a writer in Caroline's Comedy Hour, and he hosted a couple of shows after that. But his journey to become one of the greatest television entertainers of all time started on the 6th of March 1992. John appeared on NBC's Late Night with David Letterman. And when Letterman left the show, Stewart was being considered as a candidate to take over. But instead they gave it to one Conan O'Brien. It didn't matter though, as John had already made a fan out of Letterman. In 1993, John developed the Jon Stewart Show that instantly became the second highest rated show on MTV behind Beavis and Butthead. David Letterman, who was the final guest on the show, was a big fan. There was much speculation that Stewart would replace Tom Snyder on the Late Late Show with Tom Snyder that was produced by Letterman. But that didn't happen. But what did happen was in 1999, Craig Kilborn left The Daily Show to replace Tom Snyder. And guess who took his place?
Who?
Jon Stewart. And this is where he started to build his legacy. The Daily Show was created by Liz Winstead and Madeline Smithberg in 1996. The original host of the show was Craig Kilborn, a former ESPN SportsCenter co-anchor. But back then, The Daily Show wasn't as politically infused as we know it today. It was more focused on pop culture. The guests were mostly entertainment celebrities instead of politicians, and in Stephen Colbert's words, the show involved more character-driven humor as opposed to news-driven humor. Kilborn was just an anchor who read the jokes that were written for him. Kilborn left the show in 1998. Enter Jon Stewart. The show was even renamed to The Daily Show with Jon Stewart in 1999. Jon turned the tables. He revitalized the show, bringing a sharper political focus to the humor. With his comedic flair, he became an instant hit with the audience. I mean, come on, who would you want to host a comedy show? A guy who narrates highlights or someone who actually tells jokes for a living? But it wasn't always the jokes though. He had a sense of authenticity to his persona that made the people relate to him. There were times when he would just keep the comedy aside and talk about serious topics, like the Christchurch shooting, the death of Eric Garner, or this famous segment right after the 9/11 attacks.
Any fool can destroy. But to see these guys, these firefighters, these policemen, and people from all over the country, literally with buckets, rebuilding, that's extraordinary. And that's why we've already won.
People started relying on his satire more than the actual news. Co-creator of the show Winstead called him, quote-unquote, the voice of the viewer. He was inadvertently being grouped into mainstream journalism. As a result, he drew criticism for not conducting sufficiently hard-hitting interviews with his political guests.
The group that was assigned the job of coordinating the presentation about going to war in Iraq met weekly.
I guess so. I don't know. That would have been at a different level. The NSC met frequently.
Did they tell you anything?
He hit back at the criticism, saying that their job as a comedy show is entertaining people and that they did not have any journalistic responsibilities. He had beefs with a lot of traditional journalists, the most famous and the most public one probably being his appearance on Crossfire in 2004, where he lampooned Tucker Carlson and his co-anchor for not handling their journalistic responsibility.
You know, it's interesting to hear you talk about
I felt the
my
sparks between
responsibility to the, you know, I didn't realize that, and maybe this explains quite a bit.
No, the opportunity.
Is that the news organizations look to Comedy Central for their cues on integrity. So,
But he did not let any of the criticisms affect his unabashed style of comedy and bringing the news to the people. He invited many high-profile guests to his show, even once on the opposite side of the political spectrum, and he wasn't afraid to ask what was on his mind, or rather what was on America's mind.
It's quite good. Is it good?
Yeah,
Where's Osama bin Laden? I can't reconcile the brilliance and knowledge that you have of the intricacies of the market with the crazy bull I see you do every night.
There's a market for it, and you give it to them, and I think
There's
we
a
do.
market for cocaine and hookers.
Well,
John's last episode for The Daily Show aired on the 6th of August 2015. There was a reunion of former cast members and guests. The final guest was Louis C.K. After considering comedians like Chris Rock, Amy Poehler, Amy Schumer, and even Louis C.K., the reins of The Daily Show were handed to Trevor Noah, who has done a decent job of filling those giant-sized Stewart boots. Since then, he has kept a relatively low profile. He used his position to do some good work outside the show as well. He was instrumental in the passage of a bill to provide healthcare and benefits for 9/11 emergency workers. He delivered a tearful testimony in Congress in 2019, going against the $7.375 billion limit in payouts to 9/11 responders. The Daily Show is what it is today because of Jon Stewart. He transformed the show into a totally different animal. During his tenure, The Daily Show won 22 Primetime Emmy Awards and 2 Grammy Awards. He took the show to greater heights. One can say he took political satire to greater heights, because it wasn't just about the awards or the critics. He and his diverse and extremely talented team of correspondents entertained and educated millions of Americans every day, altering the manner in which news was delivered. The political monologues that we see in the late night shows today were inspired by his brand of humor. He spawned the careers of comedians like John Oliver, Stephen Colbert, Hassan Minhaj, Michael Scott. He was much more than just a funny guy. He impacted a lot of lives in a direct or indirect way. He truly was the voice of America and deserves his place in the Television Hall of Fame.